So good afternoon and welcome to this concurrent session. My name is Eileen Melnick-McCarthy and I'm Director of Communications with CCMTA, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. The following session should last about 1 hour, and we'll follow it up with a question and answer period. So allow me to introduce our guests. First of all, the name of the presentation is The Importance of Winter Driving Safety Equipment. To discuss this topic, we have Carolyn Goard, Communications Manager with the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, and Ralph Warner, Director of Operations with the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada. In her role, Carolyn oversees the planning, execution, and evaluation of all internal and external communications initiatives for the association, which includes managing a diverse portfolio of national public engagement and media relations campaigns. Prior to joining TRAC in 2013, Carolyn was a journalist in Ontario's Niagara region, where she regularly reported both regional and municipal issues. Carolyn holds both an honors bachelor's degree as well as a master's of arts degree in communication and cultural studies from Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario. She also holds a diploma in journalism from Niagara College in Canada. And to her right, my left, Ralph works in the area of industry statistics, government relations, and consumer education. A major focus has been to facilitate consumer knowledge in tire selection and tire maintenance, both advancing vehicle safety performance. Ralph has worked in the tire industry for 41 years with prior roles in tire manufacturing, human resources, and environmental areas. Carolyn and Ralph, take it away.
Thank you, Eileen, for the lovely introduction. I am Carolyn, obviously, and welcome to our presentation today. So the name of our presentation today has actually shifted a little bit. We've noticed actually once we did our proposal, things changed. So today we're here to talk about winter tires in Canada, a unique challenge, and getting serious about winter road safety. Moving along, we are in Whitehorse, Yukon. So I wanted to kick things off about winter road safety in Canada. It's a really big challenge for us here. As you all know, we have very diverse weather climates from coast to coast. And, you know, as much as it's a very unique and something that we take pride in as Canadians, I mean, where are you in Canada, or outside of Canada, where you have such wonderful weather trends? It's really, really nice to get 4 seasons and you know, diversity in weather patterns. But, you know, it also poses a very big challenge for us as well. With that comes a challenge in road safety when it comes to winter tires. Oh, there we go, lovely. Okay, so when it comes to winter tires in Canada, it's a really, really big challenge for us to actually, you know, emphasize the safety benefits when you have so many areas in Canada that actually, you know, don't have severe weather conditions. So hence the purpose of our presentation is to get us to think more seriously about winter driving. And there you have just some examples of that. So obviously in you know, areas of BC, the mountainous regions, you have you know, more severe weather trends, but there's areas like Toronto and you know, other high traffic areas where, you know, winter weather patterns aren't as serious, and you know, it poses the challenge, and you know, people start to think, oh, I don't really have severe weather problems, so why would I need to drive on winter tires? So our main challenge is really education, and we find that there is a true lack of understanding when it comes to winter tires. I mean, generally people understand the anecdotal information about winter tires, but when it comes to the technical minutia, that's where we fall short. So as our role of being the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, that is our goal. Educate our leaders first and foremost, because if our leaders aren't understanding this information, how can our consumers in turn understand this information? So just to give you some context, wanted to show you some winter tire utilization across Canada historically. As you can see, in 1998, we had 35% of Canadians on winter tires, and these are just estimates that Ralph has prepared for us, so our industry estimates have led us to these numbers, and you can see that that number has grown quite significantly in 2014, and now we're at roughly 65% utilization. So, I mean, that is I mean, very, very good to see that we have increased over the years, but it also poses a challenge because we have X number of people who still aren't riding on winter tires, right? So just to give you a little bit more context and to explain why those numbers have grown over the years, in 1998, our industry data shows us that 3.1 million tires were sold across Canada, half of them in Quebec. So I'll point to that a little bit later, but Quebec has always sort of, you know, more or less been a leader when it comes to winter tire adoption. So they're always a really, really good example that we like to reference. And in 1998, also, when we're looking at the rise, you see new technology advances in winter tire performance, which also increases adoption. 1999, so this is something that Ralph, my colleague, will speak to in more detail, but we have the introduction of the three-peak mountain snowflake symbol, which I hope you all have a vague understanding of. So this made it a little bit more easy to distinguish tires more clearly from all-season tires. And this has thus increased winter tire promotion by industry and others. And of course, in 2008, which I'm sure you're all aware of as well, Quebec introduced its winter tire law, which significantly drove up utilization both in Quebec and the rest of Canada. So just a little bit of information to show you how we've reached 65% utilization in 2014. So just to break this down even further, these are stats broken out by regions in Canada, and you can see that Quebec is at 100% for obvious reasons. But again, this speaks to the notion that there is so much diversity in, you know, weather trends and driving habits across the country that our numbers are so, they have fluctuated so much from coast to coast that, you know, we have BC and Yukon that are kind of really, you know, behind the trends, and then we have folks in the Maritimes who obviously have a better understanding about winter tires. And just one thing I really want to drive home is that the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, we really understand and empathize with our leaders. Obviously, mandating winter tires and encouraging drivers to use winter tires is a big, big decision, and certainly one for the driver as well, because at the end of the day, winter tires are a big purchase as well. So why don't people have winter tires? In 2014, so last April, the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada conducted an online consumer study, and within that, we actually asked drivers about, you know, do they use winter tires, hence where the 65% also came from, which was at par with the data that we generate. But we asked people who don't use winter tires, why not? And this is a really, really important slide to consider, and it's one that we will speak to in more detail, but really the major factor here is that 63% of people that don't use winter tires believe that their all-season tires are good enough. And this is a fact and, you know, a key piece of information we really, really want to drive home. And obviously we will unpack it more and more, but that is not always the case. Certainly there are a lot of different and, you know, variety of tire products available in the market, but all-season tires are ultimately, we believe, a compromise to winter tires. And, you know, that's not to say that winter tires are for everybody, but certainly something to consider. Another point, which I had mentioned before, winter tires are too expensive. So it's looking and, you know, brainstorming creative ways that we can, you know, get consumers to think otherwise. Not driving much in the winter, again, I mean, diversity of weather patterns speaks to that, and no place to store off-season tires. But really the first two items are, all of them anyways, but all-season tires are, you know, the fact that people believe they're good enough is something we really want to break out in more detail. Again, speaking to misconceptions, and I'm sure some of you maintain these ideas in the room, but again, there is some overlap here, and we will unpack these in more detail. So at the end of the day, something to consider is outside of Canada, again, we really want to drive home how, you know, we need to think more seriously about winter road safety. And it's actually, I'm not sure if any of you actually know this, but other countries in Europe take winter tires and winter driving a lot more seriously than we do. So this is a map actually that shows you, based on color coding, which countries in Europe actually mandate winter tires or, you know, have situational winter tires laws. And I realized today how much I don't know my European geography. So obviously, you can see that Russia there, but it's more or less, when you think about European countries, they think of winter tires as common sense, and we want our Canadian drivers to think of them that way too. Actually, it's interesting, in Germany, where winter tires, there are situational winter tire laws. If a driver is in an incident where winter tires are not used, their insurance policy is actually voided because it's, more or less like a foolish decision to be driving in winter road conditions without them. So that just goes to show how other countries are actually thinking about winter tire use, whereas us in Canada, it's not uncommon to drive in winter conditions without them. So our role, and something Ralph's going to jump in after this, is to educate leaders in the public on the safety and performance benefits of winter tires. And again, as I said, we are noticing that a lot of our leaders don't really understand the technical minutiae. I mean, we get the anecdote, we get that winter tires save lives, but we're here to tell you in more detail why. And ultimately, we want to educate leaders and encourage you to think of creative ways that we can encourage drivers to use winter tires so that, more of us are thinking safer, and how do we drive on roads safer in the winter months. So with that said, I will bring over Ralph, and Ralph will take over from here, and then I will be back shortly.
Don't worry, folks, you won't have me for too long. I'm going to start off with a story, and the story it has some emotion to it, but it also kind of kicks off, if you will, what caused some of the changes that got us to where we are in terms of winter tires. On December 14th, 1994, Jennifer Ann Jones was killed in a motor vehicle accident on BC's Sea to Sky Highway. It's the one that goes from the ocean up into the mountains. Her vehicle spun out of control. It was struck by an oncoming vehicle on a snowy and slush-covered day. We've all heard stories like that. We have all too many of them, and they're very sad, but it has become part of the history, and it has because about 2 years later, the BC Coroner's Inquest issued its report, and in its findings, it had 3 very interesting recommendations. The first was that the BC Ministry of Transportation and Highways, I'm reading this to make sure I get it right, continued to lobby for legislation pertaining to the distinction and definition between summer and winter tires, and that distinction be molded on the tires. The second was that Transport Canada, who are responsible for vehicle and thus tire safety, recommended that they enact regulations defining and providing performance specifications for winter and summer tires, and that distinction be molded on tires. The third was that the Tire Technical Committee of the Rubber Association of Canada, that was us before we changed our name to the Tire and Rubber Association, take the initiative and provide a manufacturer's standard for summer and winter tires, and that the distinction be molded on tires. The incident that I referred to is really but a point in time, but it drew focus on an issue that ultimately thrust Canada into a leadership position on winter tires. The Tire and Rubber Association, along with the North American Tire Manufacturers, the USA Rubber Manufacturers Association, our sister organization in the USA, and Transport Canada, all put our heads together, and we developed and published a voluntary performance standard for winter tires. The three-peak mountain snowflake was born. That's where it all started. It came out of the recommendation from the coroner's report, and it began in Canada. The performance-based standard was ultimately embedded into the motor vehicle tire safety regulations in Canada and in the US and in many jurisdictions around the world today. So it's had an interesting evolution in history. So what are winter tires? What makes a winter tire a winter tire? What entitles the manufacturer to put the three-peak mountain snowflake emblem embedded on the sidewall? Well, ultimately the test that we use is called the ASTM 1805 test. It's something that originated back in the 70s from General Motors, who did spin traction testing. Ultimately, it was adopted in 1986 by ASTM, and it has moved forward. The test can be done on a number of road surfaces, and ultimately for the three-peak mountain snowflake, the subject road condition is a medium-packed snow. The test itself is fairly complicated, and I have no intentions of trying to taking you through the details. But basically what they do is they have a specially equipped vehicle that has a position for the tire that they're going to test. I'll call it the candidate tire. And essentially, this truck is, or car, can be either one, is modded up with equipment that measures the forces, the spinning speed of the tire, etc. And after it does the runs, etc., it calculates the traction coefficient. There's a whole bunch of arithmetic in between. I really don't, we're not going to go into it, thank goodness. The testing conditions themselves, I mean, winter can be a lot of things. What's medium pack snow? Well, it's defined in the test standard. It's quantified, and it must be bigger than X and smaller than Y. The temperature has a range that's defined. The factors that add a huge amount of variability are controlled within reasonable ranges that typically represent the conditions that we find in Canadian winters. So that gives us a very reliable and a very robust test scenario. The test itself, the traction test, is for each candidate tire repeated 10 times, each of 3 normally successive days. So we have a minimum of 30 tests of that particular tire in order to come up with the friction coefficient or the traction coefficient. Now, if that isn't complicated enough, what we then do is we compare that particular tire performance on those same days with a standard reference test tire. That just happens to be a P195 75 R14. It's a Uniroyal Tiger Paw Plus, which in its day was a good performing on snow all-season tire. So that's the base that every winter tire is compared to. So on any given day, suppose the snow is got a little more traction than the previous day or the following week. Because each day you're running the SRTT, the standard reference test tire, then the subject tire, then the SRTT, then the test tire. So you're always comparing them on equal terms and in equal parameters within controlled conditions, and you measure how the subject tire compares to the standard reference test tire, the good performing all-season tire. And you calculate that as an index. So you have the tire that you want to qualify as a winter tire, its performance compared to the standard all-season tire, and you state it as an index. So 110 was set as the threshold. So the winter tire has to perform 10% better than the standard reference test tire in order to qualify. It's a very robust test. It's a very reliable test, and it's a very useful test. It's been around for a long time, and actually that SRTT is used for many other purposes in terms of friction coefficients within our standards. So this is what we have, this is what we use, and this is how we define what is or is not a winter tire. If I forget to move the slides, I hope somebody tells me. All-season tires. It all sort of references back to an all-season tire. All-season tires are really a North American phenomenon. If you go to Europe, you won't find hardly any, if any, all-season tires. We all know what a summer tire is. It's a tire used in the summer. It's got a fairly, shall I say, unaggressive tread, and some of your more high-performance tires are summer tires. But they're really great for summer, but they don't start to do so well when you vary into the other road conditions. So the industry came out with an all-season tire. At the time, it was designed in order to give better performance in all seasons, and it does just that. There's a lot of variation within all-season tires, but they have tread designs and other technologies that improve their performance in a myriad of different road conditions, and that includes winter conditions. But you have to remember that it's a tire that's designed for all year-round use, and it's trying to be all things to all people, and it doesn't do all of them really, really well. It does a lot of them as best it can when it compromises with all of the different things that it's being asked to do. But that's the baseline that we use for measuring the performance of a winter tire. It has to be a certain level better than that. Winter tires are designed specifically for severe winter driving conditions. They're not being designed to operate in the summer. They can, they're safe, but they don't perform nearly as well as summer or all-season tires in the summer. They don't wear as well, they're noisier. You won't like them as well. But in the winter, they're the cat's meow. And I had all kinds of little comparisons, and I decided to just leave it at they're the cat's meow. They are really good. How many here drive on winter tires? How many, we're preaching to the converted for Pete's sake. How many remember the first time you got into a snowy road or an icy road, the first set of winter tires? Pretty nice experience, wasn't it? I won't tell the story here because it takes a while, but I mean, I was wowed by my first set of winter tires. I had no idea how good they were. So we know, but there is a good solid science behind it, and really the advantage is so good, we need to get the word out. We need to make them part of driving vehicles in the winter in Canada, which is really why we're here. I think I missed one of the points that's supposed to be made here. All-season tires come with the M and S, the M plus S emblem on them. And of course, the M to most people stands for mud, and S stands for snow. And so it's an easy jump to say, well, they got the S on a tire, it's got to be a winter tire. Well, as I said, it really is made to handle some winter tire conditions, just not as well as they could. A winter tire comes with the M plus S and the Three Peak Mountain snowflake symbol, combined, both of them. So the winter tire in North America is defined by having that emblem on its sidewall, and it will be accompanied with the M and the S. Okay, so how do winter tires really perform in the winter? Now we're talking Three Peak Mountain snowflake tires, and let me just get a couple of these bars up here. That's it. And I'm not at a very good angle, but I'll try and, the baseline of 100 down here, when I mentioned the test, this is how the good performing all-season tire is expected to perform. So you're going to find all-season tires, they could be a little above the 100, but typically they're going to fall a little above the 100 on downward. That's the kind of snow performance that you're going to get for an all-season tire. The minimum standard for a winter tire is 110. We did a survey of 9 leading manufacturers in 2010, asking them about their winter tire lines that they were selling in Canada. There were over 150 tire lines that were part of that database, and we asked them where they fell in terms of that 1805 test. 42% said that their winter tires fell between the 110 and the 115. A further 22% said they fell between the 115 and the 120. And yet a further 36% said they fell somewhere above 120. So 125, 130, we didn't ask where, but on upwards. And of course, as technology improves, we're seeing continual improvement in that performance. So don't leave this room thinking that a winter tire is just 10% better than an all-season tire. There's lots of all-season tires that fall below the 110, and there's lots of winter tires, a lot of them, that are well above the 110. I guess the only other point, just looking at my notes, that I was going to make here is that tires are really like a lot of other commodities that we buy. There's various stages of quality. There's good, better, best, and bestest, as my daughter would tell me. And you can get different companies, different manufacturers. They have different approaches that they use. We'll talk about some of the common ones. But in essence, there's a lot of products out there. Some of them are good, some of them are really good, and some of them are fantastic. And so, that's part of what we've got. That's good consumer selection and good availability of products, and it's the way it should be. Now, you may ask, well, that's snow, but Canada has a lot more than just snow. We have ice, and some of the most horrific accidents that I've heard about are people sliding on ice. So how do winter tires do on ice? Well, here's the same chart, okay? And keep in mind, they're not regulated per se, but manufacturers do make winter tires to perform very well on ice. You've got your same 100 baseline, It's the same test essentially, except that the test parameters define the ice surface as opposed to a medium packed snow surface. So it's the same 1805 test. The 110 is highlighted simply being the threshold that was deemed to be the appropriate minimum standard for a winter tire for snow. So I just left it dark so that it gives us a frame of reference. And if I push the more buttons here, we'll see that 15%, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you all the information. There were, this is ice. I get talking and forget my notes too. This was a 2009. This is actual testing that the Tire and Rubber Association did with a number of, I think there were 20 different candidate winter tires that were tested extensively during one winter. And of those 20 tires, 15%, which was 3 of them, fell between the 100 and the 120. One was actually at 109, and the other 2s were between 110 and 120. Another 15% fell between 120 and 130. And 70% of those tires fell between 130 and 140. 40% better in terms of ice traction than the threshold for the all-season tire. That's a good, solid, robust test. So don't leave this room thinking that winter tires are just 10% better than all-season tires. They're way better. Another common way in which we see the winter tire performance expressed is in stopping distance. Stopping distance obviously has to do with traction. Obviously, they need traction in order to stop. This particular slide came out of the Canadian Tire Arsenal, and we thank them for it. But they did some tests, and you may call them a demonstration instead of a test, but they basically compared, in this case, the Goodyear Nordic winter tire on ice against their leading all-season tire. So they would have picked a high-volume and good-performing all-season tire. And essentially, they took the vehicles up to 60 kilometers per hour, hit the brakes, and saw how long it took for them to stop. And the winter tires stopped 45 feet shorter distance than the all-season tires. There are literally hundreds of examples of these kinds of charts. If you start looking at manufacturers' websites, large tire dealers, et cetera, that provide information, there's varying comparisons made with various tires on various conditions, but they all show really fabulous numbers that I don't know about you folks. I do know because a lot of hands went up when I asked who was driving on winter tires. But, you know, when I want to stop quickly, and, you know, 45 feet is a long way. That's just the difference. So, you know, it kind of speaks for itself. So, I mean, I'm not going to take you through a whole myriad of statistics. There's lots of it out there, and it all follows and provides the same kind of trend. Whoops. Oh yeah, this is it. This is one of my favorite slides because it's got the thermometer on there. Some of you look like you come out of the same vintage as me. When we didn't call winter tires, we called them snow tires. Do you remember why we called them snow tires? Because we needed them. We had the old rear-wheel drive vehicles. Carolyn hates when I tell the story. We had the old rear-wheel drive. She says, it's not relevant. That was years ago. It was, but you needed the snow tires in snow to get the vehicle started from a stop position. And we've been calling them snow tires for decades. And there are still, I'd say half the time I hear people calling them snow tires. There's nothing wrong with that because they're very good in snow. The point I'm trying to make, though, is they're really all temperature tires. They're, the rule of thumb in the industry is that at 7 degrees Celsius, winter tires are at the point where they outperform other tires in all winter tire categories, in all winter tire conditions: snow, ice, slush, sleet, wet, and even on just simply cold, dry pavement. So the advantages of winter tires kick in at that point. So they're not just snow tires. If you got someone who lives in an area, well, I don't get that much snow, or I don't drive when the deep snow falls. Well, they're far more than just snow tires. So what does make a winter tire superior to an all-season tire? And again, different companies have different magic, but the three main categories that you get, I'm going to cover here. When you look at a winter tire, and that is a winter tire in the background there, it's got some snow in it, but you see some cuts in the tire here, some channels. Winter tires have those channels that will dig out the snow and the slush and spit it out. They need to have the tread blocks themselves come in contact with the road surface, so you need to be able to evacuate that snow. So you've got different tread patterns, different ways of doing it, but that's one of the techniques that are widely used. The second is they have sipes. These are these little jagged cuts that you'll see in the tread block. They're not just there for their looks or for their aesthetics. They actually are called sipes, and they, as the tire rotates around into its contact with the highway, those sipes will suck up and evacuate the water so that the tread blocks actually touch and make good contact with the road surface. There isn't, ideally, that film of moisture or water that then increases the slippage of that tire. So it's a very important aspect of traction on wet. And ice almost always has some moisture on the top of the surface and or snow covered. So, you know, it's a very important aspect to have those sipes to draw off the water. They can be seen when you look at the tread. What you don't see, though, is another very important feature, and that's the compound itself. Winter tires come with a softer, more flexible rubber compound. More importantly, that compound stays soft and flexible at very cold temperatures, even down to -40. Some of you guys are probably watching the hockey games. You know, the pucks that those guys shoot around, you know, they slip so nicely along the ice. Those pucks are kept in the refrigerator. They're kind of like all-season tread rubber, and you keep it cold. They're hard, they're slippery. They're really not good for traction in the really cold weather. The rubber on a winter tire does maintain its elasticity, even in the cold temperatures, and it therefore gives much better adhesion of those tread blocks to the surface. And that's probably the biggest single advantage that winter tires have in terms of their traction performance over all-season tires. So why choose, which kind of tires do you choose? This particular slide is not really up here for any reason other than to sort of position what are becoming known as all-weather tires. This is a Cal Tire slide. It's in their resource material, and we just plucked it out because it made the point. You start with your winter studded and winter non-studded on the left. The all-weather tires, they're also a winter tire, Three Peak Mountain Snowflake. They achieve that 10% or better threshold for snow traction. And then on the right, you've got the all-season tire. And you can see the conditions that follow for each of them. The all-weather tires are really coming into the market in larger quantities now. They're also getting better. They essentially achieve the winter traction capability with the first two methods that I spoke of, and that is the tread configuration and the sipes to achieve what they need. They can't use the softer tread compound to a large extent because they wouldn't then perform as well in the summer. So they're essentially compromised tires. They're good compromised tires. They do give good winter performance in severe conditions, but not as good as the true winter tires. The advantage in these tires is that you don't need to do that spring and fall changeover, which is very handy for some people. And it also, the performance may not be as big an issue if you happen to live in metropolitan downtown Vancouver, where you're really only going to go up into the mountains a few times a year and you pick your weather. Or maybe you're in Mississauga, where I am, or downtown Toronto, or Windsor, some of the places that don't get as severe maybe it's a second vehicle, alternate, it's not a vehicle that has to be driven in the worst of the weather. Those are the sort of compromises that one can look at that suggest that this might be the right tire. They are available in the market. Several companies make them. They're being advertised a fair bit the last couple of years. As a matter of fact, it's I think it's OK Tire's got a really nice commercial they were doing, sort of pitting the Canadians against the Americans in their all-season tire. But nonetheless, I wanted to position where they were and how that works, because they are coming out there, and as leaders are working towards increasing the level of participation by people in their province on winter tires, you need to offset some of the complaints that people put forth. And for some people, the all-season tires are good enough. And I think if they look at the data, they're going to see they're not as good as. But and if the inconvenience of changing them over spring and fall, the cost, the storage, the things that go with that. This provides an alternative for that, which may be the right one for some people. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood it, and it's a tool that can be used to help offset some of the negatives for some of the people who it's not as critical. I think I've said what I need to say, and I turn it back over to Carolyn. If you have questions at the end, I won't be fleeing the scene. I'll be here. So.
Oh, thank you, Ralph. Can you tell that he has worked in the tire industry for over 30 years? That's why we passed that part of the presentation along to him. Anyway, so taking it back a notch, technical information aside, at the end of the day, we as an industry association and our members and other key stakeholders, we believe that winter tires ought to be considered a critical safety feature to a vehicle. And now, while they might not be legislated across Canada, they are a very important consideration that we want all leaders to consider, as well as all drivers to take. And obviously, you are our voices to help us get that messaging out there. But at the end of the day, there's more to look at. Obviously, and I will touch on this, there are obvious safety benefits to winter tires, but in turn, that provides us with a reduction in insurance costs, personal injuries, healthcare costs, preventable collisions, emergency services, and of course, road congestion, which so many of us are familiar with. So that's just kind of an all-encompassing list of things that winter tires do for us. Now to look at some stats. As I said before, Quebec is a really, really good leader, and an example that we always point people in to look at. They legislated winter tires in 2008, and with that, in 2011, I believe, the Ministry of Quebec, or Transport in Quebec, there is a proper French way of saying it, and I don't know how to do it, but they did a study to measure the safety improvements that their legislation had presented. So in the first 2 years after winter tires were legislated, the province saw a 5% reduction in road accident victims. And in turn, that translates to about 574 people per winter that are not suffering an injury. So I know 5% doesn't seem like a lot, but if you think about it this way, 575 potential lives that are being saved every winter. And of course, a 3% reduction in serious injuries and deaths. So you can see that there is physical evidence that suggests that winter tires do save lives. They do, prevent accidents and preventable collisions as well. So we do have that study available. If you want to see it, I'm happy to pass that along. So what we're doing, and I said it before, we're not taking this top-down approach and saying to our leaders why you should be legislating winter tires. Obviously, for some provinces, that's a little bit of a far cry. I mean, Quebec legislated it because we already had, 97% of folks already driving on winter tires, so it just seemed to be the logical next step. But what we're trying to do is demonstrate leadership and calling on our leaders and, stakeholders to help us get there. And there are creative ways in doing that. And just to look at a couple examples, as I said, Quebec is the only province in Canada to have actually mandated winter tires and making them law between December 15th to March 15th every year. And there are hard evidence, as I said before, that physically demonstrate, the safety benefits. But we also see in other jurisdictions, measures that have been taken to demonstrate leadership. And I always like to point to the Manitoba example as a great one. Do we have anybody representing Manitoba in this room today? Perfect. So you may be able to field some questions if they come up later. But the Manitoba program is a really innovative and great example that shows us how the province is taking initiative and encouraging winter tire use. And it also goes to show that there are ways of doing this without actually making them law. So in 2014, and I believe it was in September of last year, the provincial government implemented a low-interest loan program for winter tires, and it's actually administered by Manitoba Public Insurance. So there's two key players here. But it has proven to be enormously successful. It was reported to me, I think, just back in April that since the program was administered in September, Manitoba Public Insurance saw over 30,000 applications come through. So that's an enormous number. And at the end of the day, it's taking a really important consideration, into play here, is that a lot of people don't actually buy winter tires because of the cost. We know that it's a huge financial sting to a lot of families who can't afford them, up front. So what this program does is it makes them more financially attainable. And obviously we can see that program has successfully paid off. Another interesting thing to consider, and I'm not sure how many of you know this, but in Ontario, the Ontario 2015 budget provided a mandatory insurance discount for vehicles equipped with winter tires. So another innovative way, we're seeing insurance breaks for people who have winter tires on their cars. Another way to encourage and incent drivers to actually purchase them, because in turn they are saving money elsewhere. And another example is in Toronto. I believe it was in 2014. Taxi cabs in Toronto by law must have 4 winter tires installed on their vehicle in the winter months. So you can just see examples of ways that our different jurisdictions across the country are taking initiative, and we want to, as the industry association, and with these resources kind of available at our fingertips, give our leaders these tools, educate them, and help them think of creative ways to get more names on this list. How else can we see more provinces taking initiative here? So just some ways, kind of off the cuff, that folks can start to think of this is, there's a list here: promoting safety benefits on government websites, which we're already seeing, collecting and publicizing collision injury cost data, cross-reference to winter tire usage. So just to backtrack, the interesting thing with the Manitoba program, just for instance, is that it will give us new data. It will show us ultimately how much money is being saved in healthcare costs, how many lives are being saved annually as a result. So with the rise of more creative programs, we will see more data, and obviously that gives us more leverage at the end of the day. Government leaders personally using winter tires, obviously we want our leaders to physically demonstrate this themselves. Adopt winter tires on government fleets, put up winter tire messages on highway signs, and incorporate messaging into driver training and handbooks. And that's where we come into play. We have a lot of resources at our fingertips, and I mean, we're here, we're happy to field your calls, we're happy to send you literally whatever you need. That's what we're here for. And just another interesting example, Young Drivers of Canada, I'm sure you're all familiar with that. They did a really great initiative this past winter, and actually I took part in it. And they got a bunch of government leaders together on the roads. They had their test track. They got a whole bunch of different vehicles, different types of winter tires, all-season tires, and we physically drove these vehicles and tested how well winter tires outperform all-season tires. And I mean, it's just physical evidence that shows our leaders, oh wow, I experienced this firsthand. Now I can take this back to my office and tell my staff about it. So it's kind of a domino effect, and it ultimately proves to be really, really effective in educating people. So, I mean, our ask today is, let's be more proactive. How can we work together? How can we, drive up implementation? How can we be more creative? And we are here to help you do that. And we applaud, obviously, all the jurisdictions I mentioned on the screen before for taking initiative and demonstrating leadership, and we could not ask you for more. And as I said before, we're happy to provide resources. We've got this excellent new presentation, and happy to send that along your way. And if you have not visited us at our booth, TRAC is here, Ralph and myself, and also Canadian Tire has partnered with us as well to do some really great resources, and we've got a booth there, and actually some winter tires, all-season tire, all-weather tires, so we're happy to actually show you them. You can feel them, you can touch them, you can see them, and it's a really great learning exercise, so we'd love to see each one of you there as well.
I'm going to thank Ralph and Carolyn very much for a great presentation. I learned a lot. I loved your PowerPoint deck. Really classy, looked great. And we have a small token of appreciation for both of you. Thank you very much.